one of the reasons why we loved that our maestro, Lydia Jankowska, picked Beethoven 5 to front end Bluebeard is you have Beethoven potentially wrestling with this idea of acceptance and then triumph over destiny. And then...
and not so much in the second half of the program.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to OSA Backstage. I'm Dani Meyer. That's Oa. And on today's episode, Serena and I are joining Opera in Conversation. I think this is the last of the April/Bluebeard Blitz extravaganza of episodes. We'll see, but it was a delight to round things out with this awesome pre-show, part lecture, part literal conversation, part pre-concert talk with our friends at Opera Omaha, namely Lauren Medici and Josh Quinn. I think you guys are going to enjoy our fellow nerds as much as Serena and I did, and you are in for an absolute treat. If you have not attended an Opera in Conversation before, or you haven't attended Opera Omaha before, and you're coming to Bluebeard, definitely put this on your calendar for next time. This was so much fun. Josh and Lauren are lovely hosts, and we felt like we were in good hands. Hopefully you will too. Enjoy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Opera in Conversation, which is also a special live podcast recording for OSA Backstage. My name is Lauren Medici. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Programs for Opera Omaha. And while it is a live podcast recording, it is still Opera in Conversation. It's not Opera in Lecture for a reason. So we want to hear your questions. We want to hear your thoughts. What might be a little different with our podcast recording tonight is we have one mic in the back to pick up room sound, and we have some mics up here. So if you ask a question, I might just repeat it so that we make sure the mics catch it for the podcast. Do you have a video recording? It's only on us, so none of you are on camera. If you didn't come photo ready, I totally understand. I forgot. But tonight we're going to have a wonderful conversation about Beethoven's Fifth and Bluebeard's Castle with our wonderful artist friends from both Opera Omaha and the Symphony. You have a bio sheet in front of you, so I won't have everybody read their lovely bios, but I am going to have each of our speakers introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about kind of what role they play at each organization. So this is slightly different than what might be in their bio, but just to kind of get us started and set some context.
Sure. Hello, my name is Serena Royton. I'm the assistant conductor of the Omaha Symphony. So I work closely with when the music director is there in town, or when we have one, or any guest conductors that come in, as well as any guest artists that come through. And I sit out in the hall. I help the conductors with any balance questions, help the soloists, guest artists with any balance, and just am present in case of emergency. But other than that, it is really interesting to see how each conductor and each artist has a certain vision and then works on that throughout the week with the orchestra. I get to be a part of that whole process, and I get to be a part of the conversations that happen outside of rehearsal as well. So hope to answer any questions with any of those sorts of things.
I'm Dani Meyer. I'm VP of Artistic and also a member of the bass section. And so I am often looking out at Serena during rehearsals to wait for either a thumbs up or some sort of wide-eyed expression to know that things are going right or wrong. She is my partner in crime for the podcast that you all have been strong-armed into. Sorry, not sorry. My job at the Symphony is a translator. So whether it's a guest conductor, music director, our CEO, our marketing department, we are always figuring out what their vision is and how that best translates into pieces and people that make the symphony grow artistically, make us all feel really proud to be on stage, and then also to have a cohesive season and a vision come together.
Wow, that was so eloquently put. My name is Josh Quinn. I'm the head of music and chorus director with Opera Omaha. How do I put my job into a sentence? If I could say one thing about my job is I'm partly responsible for making sure that the musical happenings that we present in the community the music happens smoothly. Which there's a lot that goes into that, and I'm more than happy to have a conversation with any of you after if you'd like to talk about that. And then as a chorus director, I'm responsible for identifying community singers who come together and make up our chorus, our roster of chorus, which is different for each show because the productions that we present have different needs for choral forces. So it's always being strategic and mindful about which community singers will work really well together, whose voices will blend well. And I love that part of my job so much. But yeah, that's my job in a sort of not brief nutshell.
You didn't have to make it a sentence, so you're good. I think you squeezed it in the right time. So when we were doing our speaker prep conversation to kind of see how this would go, if you've met Josh before and been in one of the opera conversations, you know it's so fun because of the depth of musical knowledge. But what is so exciting for me tonight is that we have that by 3. So I hope that you also brought your music nerd questions, and I say that with love, because these are the people to answer them. So to get started, Dani and Serena, I would love for you to talk about the kind of musical context for Beethoven's Fifth. Like, what period time are we looking at? What kind of style are we thinking of? Where does it fit within kind of Beethoven's works?
Absolutely. We were actually, we were talking before we started, and this is Beethoven 5 is one of those pieces that everybody knows or everybody thinks that they know, and yet it is, as Serena put it, a choose your own adventure moment, and that includes when Beethoven was actually writing it. So this is his transitionary period going from his classical period to his romantic. And what's happening is he's writing some of the most iconic pieces of his entire repertoire. While he's writing the Fifth, he's finishing the Third, which already blew everybody's socks off. He publishes the Fourth. He publishes the Fourth Piano Concerto, the Violin Concerto, the Triple Concerto, the Mass in C, and he's also working, he finishes Fidelio, and he simultaneously works on the Sixth, the Pastoral. I don't know about you, but multitasking is often limited to like 3 things at a time. And not only is he churning all of these things out, but each of them are incredibly distinct in the voice that they're bringing. And so the Third is kind of the first indication that we get that you're going to have a very powerful, different Beethoven. But it is the Fifth that took place during as John Hankin put it, an ill-fated mega concert that kind of blew the door off of everybody. So can you talk about what that choose your own adventure means when this piece actually starts?
Sure. I guess like some insider context is if you went to conservatory, you know that this piece is like the conductor's nightmare because it's on every conducting audition for an assistant conductor job or anything. And it's one of those pieces that is notoriously difficult. And by the end of your conservatory studies, people usually have some sort of complex around this piece because it is very difficult to start. That really famous fate motive doesn't start on the downbeat, right? It also starts out of nothing. And so it is very, it's scary for both the conductor and the orchestra. I'm sure you've seen that video of that poor, conductor who is trying to give something and the orchestra wasn't sure when to come in. It's that kind of atmosphere that you might not know, but that's how we are going into this. We're all going, okay, well, I hope that we all understand when that downbeat is coming. And the other thing is he wrote it in a way where you could kind of rewrite it in 4, which they did in a disco version. But in Beethoven's, he has all these really, really short measures that over a long phrase feel like they could be put into a real. So this is what we call hypermeter, where you can feel this sense of like, we're going somewhere, we're coming away. We're going somewhere, we're coming away. And there's something really consistent and rhythmic about it. But then he'll throw in a couple of, and then it's a little bit shorter here. This phrase is a little bit shorter. So it's not quite as consistent as maybe Mozart would be. And so why is that a choose your own adventure? Well, it means that every conductor can choose which part of the phrase they want to emphasize. Because of the way that it's written, it's fairly unclear exactly what quote unquote should be emphasized based on the rules and the context of that time, harmony and all that. You can choose to emphasize the rhythm, you can choose to emphasize the harmony, all of these things. So it's like the world is your oyster. Where do you begin? Where do you start? What do you choose?
And whatever you choose in the first movement, you have to be mindful that it's also going to shape the second, the third, and the fourth movement. Because that motif, that fate motif knocking at the door, is in all of them. And so it's also like, it's 4 notes. And yet somehow, whatever you decide transforms everything else after it. And as far as like its place in time, right? Emotionally, where was Beethoven when he was writing this?
So it really is during his middle period. And what defines that middle period is the time that he wrote his Heiligenstadt Testament, which is his letter to his brothers describing his kind of despair at the fact that he was going deaf. And it was kind of, people can interpret it like a goodbye message. He was really ready. But what followed was this kind of, this triumph, I'm coming, I'm going to rise above it and all that. And so we kind of see this acceptance of his fate in that moment. And I think that's a lot of why we put this idea of the fate motive onto the symphony, even if that might not have been Beethoven's intention.
Right. His students actually apparently were the ones who associated fate knocking at the door, or destiny, or Schicksal in German, rather than Beethoven himself. But he certainly didn't deny it. And one of the reasons why we loved that our maestro, Lydia Jankowska, picked Beethoven 5 to front end Bluebeard is you have Beethoven potentially wrestling with this idea of acceptance and then triumph over destiny. And then...
and not so much in the second half of the program. One thing I would like, before we transition to Bluebeard at all, not to take your job at all, Lauren, but you mentioned this musical extravaganza that was where the piece had its premiere. Can you tell us anything about that event that went on? How long?
It was hours.
Like I think I read one record like 6 or 7 hours of just like consistent music, and most of it was Beethoven's music. But I just think that it's so like amazing. We don't have events like that anymore. I guess Coachella is the closest thing we have to that.
Beethoven's Coachella.
Yeah, but
that explains so much why I have no desire to go to Coachella.
Yeah, I mean, it just that's a little bit of a long evening. And he took so long composing it. Any thoughts as to why, or like what was he revising? Anything?
So apparently he had a notebook where he had all of his sketches. And while he was writing the third, bits of the fifth were appearing in this notebook. And he would kind of like put it on the stove, take it off the stove, go back and forth. It did take him 3 to 4 years to finally finish it. But I mean, like we said, he just, for some reason, he was adamant that he was going to multitask and not just sit with this one particular piece. And that concert that you were describing actually featured a lot of the music that he had published in between the third and the fifth. It was also his last concert as a piano soloist, which is a little sad. He had lost, I think, or it was 1812 that he would finally have lost his hearing. So this was like 1808. So he still had a few years to go, but this was his final concert as soloist. And I think the only concert I've ever heard of that was close to this was the concert that Rhapsody in Blue was premiered at, which was a 3-hour new music concert where the crowd was ready to riot by the time the Gershwin started. And then it was a collective like, oh, thank God, once we got there. So I imagine the crowd reception was slightly different to Beethoven.
Yeah, I think Tristan may be one of the only operas that rivals, or that gets close to that length of an evening, but you get intermissions. I don't know. Well, anyway, I don't know how I hadn't thought of this in the year or so we've been discussing this concert until this moment. And if we've talked about this in meetings, ignore that we've talked about it. I think this is the first time I thought about it. But one interesting thing that popped into my mind was when Dani mentioned Fidelio, which is Beethoven's only opera. Bartók only wrote one opera as well. And it's Bluebeard's Castle, which we'll hear on the second half of the program. And
we're so good at our jobs.
Yeah. Sometimes things just line up. But again, couldn't be anything. There's nothing similar about the Beethoven and the Bartók, maybe except some rhythm. But even then, it's used in such a different way. But Bartók, really not super popular in the vocal realm other than Bluebeard's Castle. He was a Hungarian composer. Honestly, though, what he may be as well known for, I don't want to say if more known for, but he was a pioneer in ethnomusicology. He was fascinated and devoted to Hungarian music, and he would travel around to really little remote villages, transcribing little tunes. Sometimes there were snippets of tunes, rhythms, melodies, and whether they were direct quotes, I don't think there were a ton of direct quotes, but they influenced his writing immensely. And we hear some of those influences in Bluebeard's Castle. It's like these jagged rhythms, melodies that use unusual tonality, so scales that aren't our traditional C major scale. But his ethnomusicological contribution to the field was immense, and really what kind of spurred the impetus for a lot of his compositions.
So we were actually, because this is opera in conversation, I'm going to ask you a question.
Let's converse.
We were talking right before we started recording. Do we think that because Bartók did some ethnomusicological, oh my goodness,
it's a great
ethnomusicological research before he wrote Bluebeard, he would do the bulk of it after Bluebeard. But do we think that his research that he had done up till that point gave him the validation it took to write a Hungarian opera that uses specifically the Hungarian language to shape the music itself?
I think so. Absolutely. That's those influences were what was leading him to be a very nationalistic composer. He didn't want to rehash the styles that had been popular, even for the last 100 years. From Beethoven on, really, this sort of leading into this ultra-romanticism that we see in the canon, he really just sort of stayed away from that. There's not a lot of his writing that really even harkens to the traditional romantic style of music, even though he was writing in that relatively same time period. But yes, I do believe that it influenced his writing in Bluebeard's Castle, even though there aren't direct quotes of a folk tune. And he did a lot of work after it. But one really fascinating thing about the inception of this piece was it was written as a submission for a competition. The Hungarian Royal Opera House had a competition and for new works. And Bartók collaborated with a fairly controversial poet and film theorist at the time, Béla Balázs. And they turned this fairy tale by Charles Perrault into an opera and turned what was sort of a dark fairy tale already that had a happy ending into a darker fairy tale with no happy ending. In addition to the dark subject matter, as I said, his writing style was so against the grain that when he submitted it to this competition, I believe they didn't even look at it. It was dismissed. He didn't advance in the competition. It wasn't performed. There was no recognition of it. It sat on the shelf for 7 years. And then 7 years had gone by and he was writing other works, no operas, because he realized, like, I had no success with that one. But he was becoming very popular as a ballet composer. So it was like symphonic writing with some stage elements. And the Royal Hungarian Opera House, at a certain 7 years after he wrote Bluebeard's Castle, approached him about mounting one of his ballets called The Wooden Prince. And he had become popular and famous enough at that point that he stood up for himself and said, I will only allow this to happen if you do it as a double bill with Bluebeard's Castle. Mm-hmm. So Bluebeard's Castle finally got its premiere as part of a double bill with a ballet. And it wasn't well received. It was a little too out there for people. And it really didn't have much of a life for about 10 or 15 years. It had some performances in Europe. And then one very interesting thing to note is that its US premiere was actually by a university. This is a very challenging, very, very challenging piece, both for the singers and the orchestra. It requires tons. But the US premiere was at Southern Methodist University in 1946.
Good for SMU.
I think it's amazing. And then the Dallas Symphony performed it 3 years later. Then doing some research, it turns out that the Dallas Symphony's music director had ties at Southern Methodist University. He was actually Hungarian. So he was bringing Bartók's some of his pieces that really was not having life to the States, and then had its New York City Opera premiere, but it was premiered in English there because they really only did works in English for a long time. They did that in 1952. Then the Met finally did it in 1974 in Hungarian, and then it really kind of just blew up as, this really epic, hour-long epic. Opera Omaha did it in 2013 with Sam Raimi as Bluebeard. And if you know anything about Sam Raimi, I can only imagine what that experience was like. If you were here and saw it, I would love to talk with you about it. But I think it's just interesting to see how its life, it really was conceived, it sat still, and then it had a hard time getting its legs. But I think you'll see now it's programmed every season somewhere, and you'll know why when you hear it.
Do we think it's fair to say that Bartók was one of those composers that always needed a champion, or he was not going to get performed? Because I think about Kusevitsky, Sergei Kusevitsky with the Boston Symphony. He would show up in Bartók's hospital room and basically say, Belly, you need to write something. And it's how we ended up with the Concerto for Orchestra, for example. But he always had to have, seems to me, someone in his corner saying, yes, we need to play either Bartók or we need to play a Hungarian composer if you have, say, a Hungarian conductor. Does that feel fair, or am I generalizing too much?
It's always great to have a little encouragement, right? I don't think that hurt anything. But yeah, it does feel, it's interesting to now to muse on this, and it could be that he was that type of a composer or an artist that needed some kind of fire.
But even compared to Beethoven, we just talked, Beethoven gave himself a 6-hour concert. Yeah. And apparently people lasted throughout the whole thing. And then you have Bartók, who has to kind of wait until he's got enough clout to say, yes, you'll do my ballet, but also you'll do my opera.
Yeah. Wow.
So, okay. So we keep saying it's dark, and we keep saying it's grim, and we're really selling it.
Opera does a really great job with the drama.
It's dramatic. Excellent.
Yep.
With the Choose Your Own Adventure with the Beethoven is entirely dependent upon our conductor and our orchestra. But there is a choose your own adventure element with the Bartok, and it's not just the artistic choices that our conductor, our orchestra, and our two fabulous singers are going to bring to it. Can you talk a little bit about why this opera is very much not your ordinary, we pick a setting and we go from there?
Really with the softball questions there.
Why don't you
Tee you up better?
ease me into that?
So, for example,
I would love to answer the question.
No, I think recently, I don't remember where in Germany they did a kind of not a revival, but they did a version where Judith was a police officer or something, and it was this kind of like, I want to say, feminist version where she had a her storyline was more that she took over and was the strong character.
And arrested him at the end.
Right, and freed the people, you know, and this kind of where she took her destiny into her own hands. But so we were talking with Lydia, and she kind of said, you know, there are a few ways of is this real or is it all happening in Bluebeard's head? And in what ways, especially you work so closely as part of your job too with all the artists and our technical designer, maybe David Murakami, that you can also speak to his work that you know. How does that all blend in, and why is it important that we all kind of have the same vision?
Thank you so much. Thank both of you. That was wonderful. Well, the reason it's not necessary. Well, it is sort of also a choose your own adventure. Is that it is purely a psychological drama. Throughout the piece, it's clear that we are hearing two characters talk back and forth to each other, but we encounter characters speaking to each other all the time throughout literature, opera, books, TV, movies, where one character is there and one character really isn't there, right? So there's definitely a blurred line between what is reality and what is just in Bluebeard's mind. Is it Judith's mind? Is it, who knows? Is it in your mind? It may be that it's supposed to be for the viewer to perceive it how they do. And I think all great art should be that way. But to speak to what Serena was talking about, the incorporation of some visual elements, we should definitely talk about that. We have an amazing designer who has created an immersive world for you all. You'll be, and again, I think Lydia mentioned this in some of her conversations about how the orchestra functions as the castle at times, musically and dramatically, how they're entering into the musical world. It's very evocative of them journeying through this castle. But in addition to that sound world, you'll also have some images projected, shadow play, some vague storytelling, but just enough to get you the plot, but not enough for it to be like, oh, we're in 1952 and this person is president. This thing has not been invented. We don't want that much specificity, so it can still stay psychological for you. So you'll see some suggestions of imagery that you'll know that when you're entering into, say, the fifth door, you'll see some vastness, some brightness to reflect the kingdom that Judith is seeing opened up. So yeah, I think that answered the question. It is another choose your own adventure because of how psychological the plot and the libretto is.
I think there's something in opera in that there are pieces that are very specifically written, and this is true in theater too, where you get pieces where there's not a lot of direction. It's open to a lot of interpretation from the creative team and how that might want to be. And it's the same in opera. And that this is a piece that, because it has all of those different interpretations, it really allows the creative team to step in and kind of decide what direction they want to go, which I think is really exciting in that space. And For those of you, I saw some of you indicate that you saw the 2012 production. So we're going to open it up for questions in just a minute. And then I'm also going to tell you to come back to Opera and Conversation afterwards and share your like compare and contrast. But going back to this space too of thinking about how that interpretation works, I'm interested to hear what you think is going to be different in this as a concert as opposed to a full production.
We got the chance to speak to Lydia, and so I think as a semi joke, we've been joking that this concert is darkness to light to darkness, because the Beethoven, as you probably well know, ends in the most glorious C major. It's above and beyond. As I'm sitting here thinking about it,
Rivals the fifth door C major, though.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I was just thinking,
How
it's
interesting.
actually darkness to light to darkness to light to darkness. It's in 5-part form, and the guy who writes our program notes for the symphony, Matt First, is a composer and a music theorist, and he was telling us the other day that the symphony is in C minor and obviously then C major at the end, and then the Bartok is in F sharp, going to C, and then back to F sharp. And what's hysterical is that tritone in the Bartok is very important, but we accidentally set up that tritone as well with the first half of the program. Audibly, you will be going from C major after the first half and then going into F sharp to start the second. So whether you have that, whether you know that consciously or not, you're going to experience that anyway.
Can you go and explain maybe what tritone means for those who don't speak the language?
A tritone, it's the devil's chord.
Yeah, so there's this interval, these two notes that when played together cause back, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, was caused to people could get physically ill from it. It was the devil's interval, and because it was just something was just off about it. And why is it off?
It's off. Sorry.
No, our regular scale, the notes between two of the same notes in an octave are divided by 12 semitones, and so the note furthest away by 6 is the tritone.
And also, interestingly, when you first, when music was first, Gregorian chant and everything, they came up with this concept of perfect intervals. And so you had the perfect octave, you had the perfect unison, you had the perfect fourth, and the perfect fifth. And guess what sits between the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth?
The tritone.
It's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
also very jarring. It's one of the greatest intervals ever, and it has never made me throw up.
Same.
Not once.
That's a great endorsement.
Yeah. It's like if you take a C major triad, which is like the most not basic, but most generic of musical.
If you've heard the chimes telling you to go back in at the end of intermission.
It's just, that's it. The note that makes the tritone is like right in the middle of some of those notes. So
Should we try and sing it?
We can try, sure. See how it fights?
Yeah.
So it's the devil's interval, and you hear that.
You hear that, and in addition to having these two works in concert, you also have, so something we talk a lot when we program is how do we want the audience to enter the hall? Both halves. How do we want you to be? Where do we want to set you up for success? And so there is something really, I feel like we're going to make it extra jarring for everybody to come into the hall and have the very startling open of Beethoven 5, which no matter how many times you've heard it, will always be it will always hit you like a brick across the face, which A+. And then you finish with this incredibly optimistic, grandiose, he's introduced the piccolo, the contrabassoon, and the trombone section for the first time in symphonic rep, and he uses them all to really just bring up this level of euphoria at the end, right? And then you're going to go out into the lobby, and 20 minutes later when you come back in, you start with the quietest, most foreboding low string section entrance
in octaves. There's like nothing happening harmonically. It's just one note, and it's also equally as jarring as the ba 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 ba, right, which is in your face jarring. This this kind of downward descent.
So unsettling.
It's just like something's gonna happen, and it does for the next hour.
Right. So there is a feeling of you're going to have to mentally brace yourself for two very different starts. And ordinarily in Symphony Land, whatever we put on the second half of the concert, we feel like we've teed you up for by the end of the first. And in this case, it's just like, no, hold on to your butts.
Let's really quick. Sorry.
No, you're great.
Sorry.
I do want to let questions from our audience.
Well, why are we doing this in concert? I think is another question.
Yeah.
So, like, why are we at the Holland Center in a concert with the opera? Obviously, we're familiar with the symphony playing there, but it's not our traditional space. There are some pieces in the operatic canon that the composers were not thinking about 2026 in Omaha and the spaces that we had to perform in. And they were writing for orchestras that were 2 times the size of what we could fit in the pit at the Orpheum. Well, Bluebeard's Castle happens to be one that is just too large for our pit at the Orpheum. So if you want us to have a theater that has a large enough pit, that's the plug. But this, performing it on stage at the Holland Center gives us so many opportunities. Serena, do you want to talk about like some of the instruments that we'll see and some things that the benefits to being on stage with the singers versus being in the pit?
Well, I wanted to add also, when you're talking about other reasons, there are a couple of other practical reasons. Hungarian is very difficult for singers to learn. So it's very often performed Bluebeard's Castle as a semi-staged or just in a concert setting and with music. I don't think it necessarily takes anything away from it, but I think it also allows for some, for David Murakami to do something really interesting, like having the orchestra be part of the castle and have the characters interact with those parts and be within the orchestra. And then what you'll see, there are things like 2 harps, for example, which, it's not the 7 harps of Wagner, but 2 is still, is this a lot more? We can read out
There's offstage brass.
There's offstage,
That...
Which?
Yeah, you have to talk about
No,
that.
please.
No, please. I was leading it to you to talk about the full effect.
I will let you. But we have 4 flutes, and so basically triple winds, but with 4 flutes, and then 4 of all the brass instruments. So you can think of it almost as everything is double the size. We have 2 harps. Everything is doubled. We've got celeste and organ as well. How many opera houses have organs, but space? Would the organ be off somewhere?
It would be electric piped in, probably.
Just absolutely. Yeah. As well as 8 additional brass players for this offstage brass.
And they have some of the coolest effects that they're not actually really playing specific notes. So Bartók notates in the score that the walls of the castle are you're supposed to hear them sighing, whether it be like crying or moaning or wailing. And a really cool effect that you'll be hearing off stage, our brass players will be blowing into, I'm not sure if you've talked to them about this effect at all, but they'll be blowing into their instruments in an unusual way with, I don't believe it's specific pitched. Is it?
This is what it looks like here. It's noted just like that.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. Is there pitch? I can just.
There is
pitch. It's like just these oscillating chords where the trumpets on stage will have a swell and then come away, and then the offstage trumpets will have a swell and come away. So you'll kind of hear this effect coming from trumpets or brass that you can see, and then brass that you can only hear but can't see coming from somewhere else.
So cool. So those are some really cool things that we can achieve at the Holland Center. In addition to being able to have David Murakami, who does work in opera. He does mostly work in opera, so getting to work with a visual designer who speaks this language, it's really exciting, and I think we're in for a really special treat.
As you can tell, we could go on for hours, but I want to, and if you've been to Opera in Conversation before, you know that I have asked one of my page of questions. So if you don't have questions, don't worry. But I want to make sure that if we have any questions from our audience, that we get to answer those.
Well, I'm looking forward to all of this additional instrumentation for the performance. But I have a question about the opera performances at the Orpheum. What's the size of the orchestra for those performances, and how are the orchestra members selected? Is there a rotation, or you have a set group who play for the opera?
That's a great question. So she was asking about when we are in the pit, how do we fit in the pit? Which is an excellent, we often wonder the same thing. So we have, one of the ways that we make things work is that we shrink down our string section to accommodate the brass, winds, and percussion needs of the rest of the orchestra. And so we often have, I want to say it's like 6-6-5-4-2, something where it's 6 first violins, 6 seconds, 5 violas, 4 cellists, and 2 bass players. And then we get very creative about how we structure the winds, brass, and percussion in the rest of the space. So you'll notice if you ever come down and look down, the percussion is often back against the wall. Sometimes they're even off in a different room, and they are being cued by video camera, depending on how present their sound has to be. The brass have to be situated in such a way for our French horns, for example, need to be near a wall and not blasting into another musician, because of course their bells go to the back. So they have to be placed strategically. Our trombones, tuba, and trumpets need to be not playing directly into our cello and viola sections. So it becomes a game of Tetris, but we're very familiar with it. And we also, if we can increase the string players based on the space, we do. And so what happens at the symphony has a core group of musicians. Those are our front stands of every section that you'll see. I believe we have 16 core, I want to say it's 16 to 20 core violins, 6 core violas, 4 core cellos, and so on. And so those are always our first call for opera. This is some of the hardest repertoire that they play all year, every year. And so we obviously want our symphony musicians who do this full time, who are our core, to be the ones in the pit to play those.
And we're really lucky because they're so great.
When they were talking about fitting, that's not like a guest situation. There's actually a scale drawing of the pit, and then figuring out where everybody goes and how it fits. And so it's very detailed, those conversations. And those conversations happen really early and can help determine what is going to be part of the season, what's possible.
And where we perform.
Yeah.
Because, like we said, Bluebeard's castle would not fit in the pit, so we had to be, okay, where would we be? And then it made perfect sense because this was a co-production collaboration with the Omaha Symphony, so the Holland Center was perfect.
And I'll share a secret. If you play bass for the opera, right next to where the basses are is an opening into the basement of the pit, but there's hooks on the wall, so you can put your case right there.
Prime spot.
It can be a little precarious down there to maneuvering around things when all the stands and some of the platforms are down there, but we're lucky.
Question.
Yeah, there are significantly smaller pits around, so we're not complaining at all.
Yeah, great question. Other questions from our audience? I want to know from anybody who saw Bluebeard and has memories of it, if there was anything that when Josh mentioned we did Bluebeard in 2012, that came to your mind immediately about Bluebeard?
What came to my mind is in Des Moines, when it was in a couple years ago, and they had this new projection. You felt like you were in these caves and tunnels, and it was just a projection type thing, and it was just amazing, and that's what sticks with me.
Yeah, in the one view it was, well, this one was fantastic because the entire theater, the floor, everybody was in the projection.
Yeah, in the castle.
Really fabulous. But here, we sit really down front, and the set was really massive. It was really dark. I remember purple, there were there was a lot of projections there too, including on the stage, and it was really more lighting than not so much projections. But the second time we saw it from up above, it was really different because there was a lot more. But we sit way down front. It was really big, and a really super great thing. And Sam Raimi, of course, was fantastic.
And I will say they hosted the dinner at his house for Sam Raimi.
Oh,
good. Yeah.
Amazing.
That was fun.
He was a nice dinner guest too. He wasn't threatening at dinner.
Well, so okay, I'm glad he wasn't threatening at dinner because I see that shot of Ryan McKinney.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just we haven't worked with Ryan McKinney. The symphony has had Michelle DeYoung. She sang Das Lied von der Erde with us, with Thomas Wilkins conducting, and I remember that woman walks onto stage and her presence alone is enough to take up the entire space. And what was so captivating about the Mahler that she sang was she has to wait. She has to wait at least 25 minutes before she gets to sing her first note. And I swear the tenor she was singing with, who was fabulous, was also shaking in his boots because Michelle DeYoung is sitting right there. Forget the audience. He had to sing while Michelle was there, just looking like an Amazon goddess the whole time. And so having her come back to sing this incredibly powerful and complicated role across from Ryan McKinney, who just, everything I've heard about him screams that this man is going to do something really interesting and powerful as Bluebeard. Like, I'm already... Yeah.
I, really quickly, here's my fangirl on Michelle DeYoung's story. I first worked with her in, was it 2020? It was right before I moved here. I can't remember time, whatever that was. It was right before I moved to Omaha, though. And we were just up the road in Sioux Falls, not Sioux City, Sioux Falls, with the Sioux Falls Symphony, Sioux City Symphony. Sioux City. Iowa? Which one's that? Iowa. Sioux City Symphony. And we were doing a Mahler 2 there. And again, the mezzo soloist has to wait for what? Longer than Das Lied. And she stood up, and we all have those moments in the theater where it will stay with you forever, like you were changed. I was changed. Michelle DeYoung is a force of nature. Her voice it's not even just her voice, because at a certain point when you're famous, it's a given that you've got a good voice. It's everything else that she does with her instrument. It's how she can deliver text. It's how she can color her voice. She's also a really accomplished conductor. So knowing that and knowing her musicality and everything she brings to it, she's just a consummate artist. And when I first moved here, literally, I had just done that Mahler 2, and I was like, well, we have to, there's got to be something that we can bring Michelle DeYoung here for, right? Because I was so moved by that. And it stays with me. It's still the most moving experience I've ever had in a theater, and it was because of her. So I'm so thrilled that you can have that. Hopefully you have that. And she's doing a little bit of a different type of a role in this experience, but you'll still hear what she can bring to the stage with her voice. It's incredible. And there's a really amazing recording of Bluebeard's Castle on Apple Music with her singing the role. So if you're curious about what she sounds like, I encourage you to check out that recording. It's really great. It's a fantastic live recording.
Any other audience questions before we go back to my list? No. Okay. I want to know, in thinking about the things that you're really excited to hear in this performance, what are the, you've talked about a little bit of them, but what are some of the moments you're really excited to hear?
So we've talked about door number 5. So excited to see how many of you are already familiar with the doors, or should we walk through them? Okay.
We should probably just mention what the doors are.
But there were so many hands. You've all
Yeah,
done your work. That's amazing.
We'll do a speed run. Bluebeard brings his newest wife back to his castle. It is completely dark. She's feeling the walls. She's quite concerned about the fact that there's no light coming in whatsoever. And so we'll find out how Michelle does this, but she cajoles, she persuades, she berates. She eventually gets him to start opening doors. And so what you see in sequence is the torture chamber, the armory, his treasure, his garden, and door number 5 is his kingdom. It is the most light, the most stunning, the most awe-inspiring, sudden panoramic view of everything that Bluebeard is lord over. But the next door is the Lake of Tears. And the final door is his previous wives. And again, we'll have to wait and see what Lydia, Michelle, and Ryan choose to do with David. But the question is, are the wives real? If they are they alive, or are they dead? And what's going to happen to Judith at the very end of the opera? So I personally, I loved listening through this piece, but door number 5 is so jarring, again is the word. It's so jarring because there's been no happiness really whatsoever. And so you get this brief glimpse of truly exquisite, glorious, possible happiness that gets tainted very quickly. Super looking forward to that, and also super looking forward to the most romantic part of the opera, which is unfortunately when the other wives are revealed and Bluebeard is making it clear that Judith is not making it out of the castle. It's horrifying and it's beautiful. Favorite things that you're excited about?
The extra sounds that the castle makes. I'm interested in the castle sounds of the wailing, the wind of the night wailing, and the deep sobbing sigh. And I'm wondering how we're going to do that actually. Is that going to be like a button that someone presses and it's electronic? Or is it going to be an acoustic effect? Are we going to have Josh behind a closed door wailing?
I've seen you in some Omaha operas.
Yes, you have. And I will not be doing it for this. But I would venture to say that it will be acoustic, but I don't know. You might have to come and see. Yeah, I mean, there are a couple things I'm really excited for. The first 5 seconds of the program, really. I can't think of the last time that I heard Beethoven 5 in concert, live. So I'm excited for that. It's gonna be great. And then I don't know if I have to pick a favorite door. I don't wanna steal the same one that Dani chose, because I am really looking forward to the 5th door. But I actually think the 6th door, the Lake of Tears, may be my favorite. Of course, I love the 5th door, but the 6th door, there's something really special about it. The way that the harp and the celeste are sort of, you don't know what's happening. There's blowing sound. There's this, a motif, as we talked about before with these fate motifs. There's this descending tritone motif that happens a lot in the opera. And so we hear this sort of like wash of and then so something's not right. Anytime you hear it is that tritone. I'm also really excited to hear there is another motif that Bartók infused throughout the entire opera, the blood motif, which fitting for this opera. And it's really just a use of two notes, and it doesn't have to be any specific octaves, but it's these two notes. A minor second is this interval, and we talked about intervals before with the tritone, but a minor second is the closest interval. It's like the two notes that are right next to each other. So how the ba ba, that tritone gives you some kind of unease, this ba da ba. If you think of the Jaws theme, the ba da ba da, there's something unsettling about that. We don't know why, because we've been conditioned to know that that's unsettling because there's a shark. But it's that same interval, and we hear it throughout the entire opera. And once you hear it the first time, you will be able to pick up on it every time it happens. And it's honestly probably on every page of the score because of the way intervals work. There's probably a minor second somewhere. But you hear it with either string tremolos, so where they're bowing fast, but they're these two notes next to each other that's just fighting against each other. And if you imagine them right next to each other, there's a sense of a sense of maddening about it. So I'm really excited to hear that, and then to notice the first one, and then for it to just pop up everywhere. Of course, I'll have my score, so I will start circling it, and then it won't be fresh to me for the second time, but I'm excited for that.
I love that you're going to be circling things in your score.
Yeah, everyone knows I'm a nerd at this point, and if you saw my music library, it would give it away.
I don't think it was a secret. Well, thank you all so much for being part of this conversation. Your enthusiasm and excitement for this piece has given me a whole list of things to look for and to listen for and be excited to hear next week. I hope that you already have your tickets. We are at the Holland. We're not at the Orpheum. So we'll see you next Friday and Saturday for Beethoven's Fifth and Bluebeard's Castle. And then we will be back here the Tuesday following. And I want to hear your thoughts about if all the things that we were hoping for, if you felt like they happened, or, and we don't fully know how the projections are going to feel in that space either. So let's all report back. Thank you so much to Josh, Dani, and Serena for this wonderful conversation. And I hope that we'll see you at the symphony and the opera. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.